life throws at us, we'll face it together. As a family.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in the Fantastic Four First Steps. This movie is huge, with tons of little background details, as director Matt Shakman and his team really populated all the corners of this new world.
New world? I thought this was an MCU movie. Is it a Sony movie, person? I don't like Sony movies.
No. It is set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it is set in a different universe, Universe 828, which we learn in the credits is named after Jack Kirby's birthday. And believe me, I'm going to talk a lot about my hero Jack Kirby later on. So this movie is set in the early 1960s when Kirby and Lee first created the Fantastic Four. But it's a version of the 1960s with a retro future aesthetic, where people drive flying cars or cars with these bubble domes. Basically, this is how people in the 1960s imagined the future will look like on shows like the Jetsons, which by the way is why we designed this Jetsons parody merch that you can find at our merch store. I'm going to tell you about that later on in the video. And don't forget also to subscribe to our brand new Crossover Universe podcast, where every week we bring on a new nerdy guest, from Hollywood producers like Sev Ohanian to Mark Guggenheim to authors like Claudia Gray. Links are below. So while this movie doesn't take place in the same universe as Iron Man, these characters are going to travel to the 616 universe like we saw in the post-credits tease of the new Avengers. And all these cast members will be a huge part of Avengers Doomsday. In fact, we covered all of that in our Indeed Explained video. Now, I would like to address why this movie is such a big deal for comic book fans. The Fantastic Four are called Marvel's first family because their 1961 debut was the official start of the ongoing Marvel Comics universe. Marvel was bankrupt when Jack Kirby rejoined the company after being fired for freelancing on the side years before. And when Kirby joined Stan Lee, he unleashed a multitude of ideas that spurred the explosion of Marvel Comics in the 60s. Jack Kirby had a limitless imagination, and Stan Lee was the perfect collaborator to harness his vision and provide snappy Stan Lee dialogue. Now, when the FF debuted, comic readers were used to stodgy old superheroes like Superman and Batman, who talk like this all the time. But the Fantastic Four were different. They fought, they groused, they were human, and they set the tone for characters like Spider-Man, Daredevil, Wolverine, and all the Marvel characters we know and love today. The Fantastic Four have also always been very personal to Jack Kirby. The book combined the comic book genres that he had been working on for years: monster books, romance, and superheroes. Susan Storm was named after his daughter, and Ben Grimm was always a proxy for Kirby himself. For instance, Kirby grew up on the rough streets of the Lower East Side, just like Ben Grimm, and his childhood street gang was the inspiration for the Yancey Street Gang, Ben Grimm's old gang that pranks him in the comics and hassles him in this movie. Plus, Jack Kirby also created both Galactus and the Silver Surfer, and there's actually a huge controversy around the Silver Surfer that I'll explain later on. Now, let's dive into the movie. The Marvel Studios logo is the same retro design we see on the classic Cinerama Theater in Los Angeles, and shout out to the channel New Rockstars for that observation. The 1960s aesthetic was also a natural fit for director Matt Shakman, who directed the hit series WandaVision. Remember, the first two episodes of that show were set in a fake 1960s reality that Wanda created. And instead of beginning with a big action sequence, the movie starts with a scene that is even more tense: looking for a home pregnancy test. Now actually, home pregnancy tests weren't really invented until 1967, and this movie set in 1965. But because of Reed's influence on this reality, a lot of science has leapt forward, similar to what we saw in Universe 838 and Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, where New York is way more advanced and green, and then has machines that reveal your past to everybody standing around you. But Reed's not the only innovator in this movie. Later in the film, Johnny tries to high-five Ben, but in our universe, the high-five was actually invented by Glenn Burke and Dusty Baker in 1977 when they were playing for the Dodgers. So Johnny Storm's an innovator too. Pretty cool, huh?
Hey, wait a minute, person. Where are you?
Yeah, dude, I'm on vacation. I'm in the Bahamas.
Oh, sure. Be right there.
Oh, no, Colton, I'm still gonna be in videos. Look, I'm not even in the Bahamas yet. This is just a green screen.
Oh. I dropped my carrot.
Yeah, I mean, while I'm gone, I can text, tweet, FaceTime, post videos from my phone, everything. It's like I'm not even leaving the country.
Person, that is way too expensive, and we have so little money.
Actually, it's not expensive because I just downloaded the Saley eSIM app. Saley has completely changed the way I travel. I download it before I go to the airport, and then I choose a data plan, and then I have internet as soon as I land in another country. See guys, traveling to these places used to be a huge hassle for me. I would land at the airport, buy a local phone, or a phone card, or a SIM SIM card, or just pay the phone company huge roaming fees. So trust me when I tell you that Saley eSIM is the way to go. If you want to start traveling this year, you need this app, and that is why I love having them as a sponsor for this video. Everywhere I went in the Scottish Highlands, I could use my phone to watch videos, play games, and best of all, share my experience on social media. Also, it makes it easier for me if I have to work because I can still stream and upload videos. After you choose your data plan, just make sure you apply our coupon code ScreenCrush for 15% off. That is our exclusive discount. And then you can make calls, use the internet, and it makes traveling so much more fun and just stress-free. Saley is easy, and all the plans are compatible with iOS and Android devices.
Yeah, but is it really hard to figure out?
No, they offer 24/7 support and a full refund if your device is not eSIM compatible. Saley is so easy and affordable, it's like bringing a little piece of home with you while you're on your trip. So, to get an exclusive 15% discount on Saley data plans, use code ScreenCrush at checkout, where you can click the link below or scan this QR code. Now, back to what I was saying. Then a special presentation by ABC catches us up on the history of the Fantastic Four. Now, ABC is owned by Disney, which is also the parent company for Marvel, so we see the network pop up over and over in this film. So this story is to celebrate the team's 4th year, meaning that they began in 1961, just like in the comics. And that means that Galactus arrives in 1965, also just like in the comics. Galactus and Silver Surfer first appeared for the Galactus trilogy arc, spanning Fantastic Four issues 48, 49, and 50, which was meant to be a celebration and anniversary for the team. I should also note that stories like this were rare back then. Comic books were always meant to be accessible to people, so they almost never had a story arc that spanned more than 2 issues. So Reed Richards is of course played by Pedro Pascal, appearing in his 4th major geek franchise. Vanessa Kirby is fresh off the Fast and Furious franchise and also played Josephine in Ridley Scott's Napoleon. And of course, Joseph Quinn was Eddie on Stranger Things, and Ben is played and mocapped by Eben Moss-Backrack. Now, this is actually his 2nd Marvel role. Remember, he played Micro in the Netflix Punisher show, but a lot of you probably know him from his roles on Andor and in The Bear. In this movie, I love that they gave a nod to that by putting him in the kitchen for his first scene.
I want to add a couple cloves of garlic. Not because it's not delicious, I just want to add a little bit of zip.
Now, his only scene as a human comes in this newsreel footage when he's actually kind of shy and makes a joke that he is the best looking astronaut.
The best pilot in the world right here.
Yeah. Best looking, he means.
Now, there's a little bit more to this than you think. Like, the Fantastic Four got their powers when their ship was struck with cosmic rays, but those powers manifested based on their personalities. They actually explained this in the 1994 Roger Corman film.
Johnny, you've always had a quick temper. Now, come on, ever since I've known you, right? You could call it fiery, so what happens?
Wait a minute, there was a Fantastic Four movie in the 90s?
Oh yeah, they made it for just $1 million, and they only did it so the studio could hang on to the movie rights until they could make the real movie later on. And they actually never intended to release the film. There's a good documentary out there about it. But the cast of that movie did finally get their flowers because they cameo in this film. Ben Grimm actor Michael Paley Smith appears here as a firefighter, and all 4 appear here thanking the Fantastic Four. It is nice that they finally got to be in a movie that was actually released. And there have been 3 other Fantastic Four films, the 2 Tim Story films in the 2000s and Josh Trank's Fant4stick movie from 2015. And believe it or not, this movie has nods to all of those films that I'm going to talk about as we go along. I should also mention that their powers were originally meant to represent the 4 elements, with Sue being wind and Reed representing water. So in the newsreel footage, Reed reveals that he and Sue were already married when they went up in the rocket. This is unlike in the comics where they weren't married until Fantastic Four Annual #1. This was also one of the many issues where Stan Lee and Jack Kirby made cameo appearances as themselves. They were the guys who were not allowed to enter the wedding. And get this, later in the movie, we do get cameos from Stan and Jack proxies. They're next to a poster that read, "Oog lives again," and Oog was one of Kirby's monster creations from the 1950s. They're working inside of Timely Comics, the original name of Marvel Comics in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. In fact, Fantastic Four issue 1 was the first official issue of Marvel Comics. Now notice that they also have Fantastic Four comics pages on their walls. This is because the Stan and Jack proxies in the comics actually did create the in-universe Fantastic Four comic book. There was even one issue where Dr. Doom came to their office. And the rocket they took off in is similar to the rocket from their origin story in the comics. But here's a detail that's easy to miss, but it's really important for the film. This opening also points out that everyone on the team is a scientist, even Johnny. This is why, later in the movie, Johnny is able to decipher the language of Zen Law. So this origin recap is all pre-roll for their appearance on the Ted Gilbert Show, which is a stand stand-in for the Ed Sullivan Show from our reality. Ed Sullivan was the biggest show on television for more than a decade, debuting the Beatles, Elvis, and your mom. But I will say this, everything in the movie is very colorful, very 1960s, but Sue does not have 1960s hair until we see these images at the end credits. In the montage, we see the team fight against the Mole Man's monster Giganto, reproducing the cover of Fantastic Four issue 1. The Thing is even wearing a full body uniform, like he did in early issues of the comic. Now, the Mole Man is played by Paul Walker Hauser, who you might know from Cobra Kai. Just like in the comics, he wears these glasses to protect his eyes from sunlight. And if you're interested in seeing how all of this played out, you can get the Marvel prequel comic. That comic book also shows why Harvey likes Sue so much and why she is able to negotiate with him so well later in the movie. This newspaper talks about how the president has taken a diplomatic trip to Subterranea, and here is a news item about Ben speaking at the Heisman Awards, because he was a football star. In fact, he went to college on a football scholarship, and that's how he met Reed Richards. Now, there is a montage of the FF fighting other villains from the comics, including the Mad Thinker and the Red Ghost and his Super Apes. Now, the Red Ghost was originally played by John Malkovich. We saw him in the first trailer, but his role has been cut from the movie. Maybe he was originally going to help against Galactus, because it would be silly to cast John Malkovich for a one-off role in an opening montage.
Malkovich.
The Mole Man collapses the Pan Am building, which in real life was renamed to the MetLife building after Pan Am went bankrupt in the 80s. Now, this is also the building that was remodeled into becoming Avengers Tower. So this is a subtle way to show how this timeline is very different from the 616 universe. Sue is a diplomat who brokers peace with the Mole Man and his kingdom of Subterranea while founding something called the Future Foundation. Now, in the movie, the Future Foundation is shown as a kind of United Nations, but in the comics, it was a think tank. It was created together super genius children from all around the world, including androids, clones, and mole people, to think of outside-the-box solutions in order to help the world. But there's a really interesting shot in this scene where the camera pans past delegates and we see that Latveria is not present. Now, we talked about this at length in our Ending Explained video, but in the comics, Latveria is ruled by the Fantastic Four's #1 supervillain, Dr. Doom. Obviously, Doom did appear in the mid-credit scene, but we don't know if this is a Doom from another universe or if it's a Dr. Doom from this world. We just have to wait for Avengers Doomsday to find out. And guys, I am so excited to show you these new shirts that we just launched for our merch store. Now, we made these special for the movies that are coming out this month. First, check out the July 2025 shirt showing two rockets passing each other, the Fantastic Four and Kal-Els. And then we have Brian from Family Guy as Crypto, who's a good boy. And for the Fantastic Four, we have this parody of them on Abbey Road, but hey, where's Sue Storm at? And then we have the Fantastic Four as the Jetsons, celebrating the retro future aesthetic of the film, as well as Clobber in Time, Flame On, and this image of The Thing as John Carpenter's The Thing. And if you become a member, you can earn rewards and get free stuff. I just want to thank you guys so much for your support, and the links for those are below. And then we see a little bit of the real-life 1967 Fantastic Four cartoon. Now, there actually was a second Fantastic Four cartoon released in 1978 that did not feature Johnny Storm, because the rights to the Human Torch were tied up in a movie deal that never actually materialized. So, the robot Herbie was actually created to take his place. So it's nice to see Herbie officially join the team, kind of, in this movie. Herbie stands for Humanoid Experimental Robot B-Type Integrated Electronics. And in this movie, believe it or not, Herbie is a practical effect. They built a wooden Herbie puppet and then augmented his features with CGI. And there was also a remote-controlled version, which was powered by a lawnmower battery, according to special effects supervisor Alastair Williams, as reported in Empire magazine. Herbie's voice is also made from the voice modulation tech from this era. And as we see later on, his eyes are programming reel-to-reel tapes from the 1960s. This is similar to the magnetic tape that Arnim Zola used to store his consciousness in The Winter Soldier. One data tape is labeled Home, and the second is labeled Space. And then the Human Torch makes a big 4 in the sky, which the Fantastic Four always uses a kind of bat signal to summon the team together, and then he flies by a billboard featuring himself for Coppertone sunscreen. Now notice that we see a red and yellow 4 logo, and it's a kind of futuristic billboard. It's animated and there's a fire effect, but it is not a modern LCD screen. So this shows us how, in some ways, this version of the 1960s is more advanced, but in other ways, it's still very far behind our current technology. In fact, there are so many background details and product placements in this entire movie that I'm just going to go through them all right now. The skyline is a mix of futuristic buildings and classic Art Deco, like my favorite New York skyline building, the Chrysler Building. That's where Thor bottlenecked the Chitauri invaders in the Avengers. And this building, with an golden orb on top is similar to Sentry Tower in the comics, which was adapted to become Avengers Tower in the MCU. And there's also a monorail running through Manhattan. Now, monorails are light trains that at one point futurists thought would be the model of world transportation. So when Walt Disney designed this world of tomorrow, Epcot Center, monorails were included. And it's true, monorails did have their time. They put cities like Brockway, Ogdenville, and North Haverhill on the map, but there are no monorails in Manhattan. Here we see a store called Westview Television, which is a nod to Westview from the show WandaVision, which was of course directed by Matt Shakman. There are also subtle touches that show how the Fantastic Four space exploration have captivated the country, like how this sign advertises a product that's out of this world. And we also see similar rockets and sci-fi designs all over Times Square. For instance, this looks like the Origin rocket that they flew to space when they flew into the celestial rays that gave them their powers. Hilariously, we also see an ad for a hover grill, probably one of Reed's patents that made him a wealthy man, that is wildly unpractical. Reed also probably created the flying cars that the police use, perfecting on the design that Howard Stark just couldn't get right.
I did say a few years, didn't I?
And in Times Square, we also see movies like Attack of the Fun Guy, which is probably a nod to Pedro Pascal's role as Joel in the Fun Guy zombie show, The Last of Us. This movie poster for The Lone Nomad looks like a nod to Sergio Leone's spaghetti westerns of the 1960s. And there's also a Disney movie called The Emperor's Twin, which is a little nod to the film's parent company. And later in the movie, the marquees all change to messages that support the team, reading things like, "Good luck, Fantastic Four." I loved the symbolism here, that people were willing to shut down their everyday lives and entertainment in pursuit of a better society. The optimism in this movie really stems from the early 1960s, when JFK promised to put a man on the moon before the end of the decade. Now, one thought I did have about this movie was that since the Fantastic Four are able to introduce flying cars and unite everybody around the world, were they also able to help with all of the tumultuous problems of the 1960s? Was JFK still shot? Did the Fantastic Four help fix civil rights? Did we go to Vietnam? In the very first promo art, we do see Ben reading Life magazine with Lyndon Johnson on the cover, so presumably JFK still was shot. But in general, the movie seems to be saying that the 1960s carried through with the optimism of Johnson's Great Society. Maybe the whole world united against Galactus even helped to cool Cold War tensions and end the Vietnam War. Or the policies of the Johnson administration, which wanted to, among other things, end poverty in America. Later, Ben walks through Yancey Street, his old neighborhood. We see Maisel's Deli, and this is actually the name of the deli in the comics when Ben took Galactus out for lunch. We also see King Dry Cleaners, named after Jack the King Kirby, and Stan Lee Service Center, named after co-creator Stan Lee. There's also a Dylan and Wyatt flower shop, which might be a nod to Wyatt Wingfoot, a friend of the team in the comics. There's also a store font that reads Silver, an homage to the Silver Age of comics that the Fantastic Four helped to define. And during the opening montage, we see a slew of magazines that tout the team's fame. A couple of my favorites are Gardening Tips with Ben, where he's holding a pot of petunias, named after his Aunt Petunia from the comics. And there's also the Golf magazine that declares Fantastic Four. Reed is hosting a science program for kids similar to the show Mr. Wizard. And when he tells the kids about the multiverse, they all yawn, which could be a meta-commentary on how audiences aren't really digging the multiverse saga.
It's just been miss after miss after miss.
And then we go from this outlandish celebrity life to a simple family dinner. In the trailer, Reed explained,
"We make a point to do family dinner every week. Sunday at 7 on the dot, no matter what."
And the movie's Twitter account tweeted that it was time for dinner every Sunday evening. Now this scene reminds me of one of the best scenes in the MCU, the Ultron after party. In order for us to think of these heroes as people, we have to see them doing normal stuff and hanging out. You know, things like watching the Thing smash garlic with his fist. Little details like that humanize the heroes. It's what makes Marvel heroes Marvel heroes. Now Johnny is always hungry throughout the movie, maybe because his flame powers make his metabolism work a little bit faster. He's spoiling his dinner with a box of Lucky Charms that features this Jack Kirby pinup of the Human Torch on the back of the box. And there's also a cutout of another Jack Kirby torch drawing on the front of the cereal box. Now the song playing is a total groove called the Oogum Boogum song by Brenton Wood. But anyways, this cute family dinner results in the family celebrating Sue's pregnancy. The scene does a great job of establishing everybody's personalities, but more importantly, how much they love each other.
You are gonna be the best mom.
You know that.
Have you looked at your husband's face?
Now, Franklin Richards is a character from the comics who was born in Fantastic Four Annual 6. While Sue was pregnant, her spot on the team was actually temporarily filled by the Inhuman Crystal, who was Johnny Storm's girlfriend. And then, during her maternity leave, the Inhuman Medusa filled in for her. Remember guys, this was a book from the 1960s written by a couple of guys from the Greatest Generation, so they had very traditional gender expectations for a woman who was expecting. But in this movie, Sue gives birth while she's on a mission and then saves the team's asses between contractions. Now, just like in the movie, Franklin's birth in the comics was difficult. The team actually had to go into the negative zone and steal a control rod from a bug god named Annihilus to save his life. Long story. But get this, they actually didn't give Franklin a name for over a year until Fantastic Four issue 98. In an interview with Roy Thomas for Alter Ego magazine, Stan Lee said, "We wanted to stretch that out as long as we could while we tried to figure out whether she'd have a boy or a girl and what to name it. We finally decided on a boy named Franklin Richards." There's even a nod to this with this magazine that's wondering what kind of powers the baby will have. And I should note that in the comic, Franklin is named after Sue's father. And then Stan Lee added, "We would assume that if two people with superpowers have a baby, the baby might have a superpower. But what superpower would it have? And we could keep the readers guessing for years until the baby grew up." And don't worry, we have a lot to explain about Franklin's powers later in the video. And also, we talked about all of that in our Ending Explained video, which you can find linked below. Now, in this world, Franklin's existence is treated as a huge bit of celebrity gossip. This headline could be from the Daily Bugle, even though the film rights for that newspaper are technically owned by Sony. This gossip magazine is asking if the Baxter Building is safe for a baby. And this magazine is featuring the concept art that they released for this film back in 2024. After the baby fame montage, Reed is receiving messages from space and then recording them onto gold records.
Oh, because they sold more than 500,000 units?
No, because a gold record will endure longer than a vinyl record. In fact, they actually sent gold records on the Voyager 1 spacecraft that included human greetings, nature sounds, and 90 minutes of music, including the song Johnny Be Good.
So in Star Trek the Motion Picture, why didn't V'ger start singing Chuck Berry?
You know what, it really should have. That would have been awesome. Reed also shows Johnny his teleportation device. And this is actually similar to Josh Trank's Fantastic movie. That film begins with young Reed Richards and Ben Grimm inventing a teleporter that gets them laughed out of the school science fair. But then they join the Baxter Foundation and build a massive version of it that actually takes them to the negative zone. Now, in the original screenplay for that movie, they were going to feature Galactus in the negative zone, and then Dr. Doom was going to become his herald. But then the studio got cold feet for budget concerns, and they scaled down Josh Trank's vision into what we saw on screen. Back in Johnny's room, he has an Andy Warhol portrait of himself. And actually, in that prequel comic book I talked about, they include a heartthrob interview with Johnny and an ad for the Johnny Storm Flaming Hearts Club. Just like in the comics, Johnny has become a teen heartthrob, which is why he gets so many endorsement contracts. And Johnny has this incredible record player that I am so jealous of. Don't worry, someday. Now, get this. In the prequel comic, there was actually an interview with Johnny Storm where he brags about his vinyl collection, so there's a cool connection there. And as he listens to these messages from space, he looks longingly at the rocket, which implies, I think, that this version of the Fantastic Four has not been on any space missions since their origin story. Meanwhile, Sue gets upset that Reed programmed Herbie to build the crib.
Or why?
Well, because Sue wants Reed to take time to enjoy being a father and to embrace some simple aspects of being a dad. But instead, Reed has to worry over every problem. In this case, he's worried about how the celestial energy of their accident is going to affect the baby.
Wait, celestial energy?
Yes. In Marvel's prequel comic, they make a point to say that this is celestial radiation and not necessarily cosmic rays, which makes me think that they were bombarded with the energy of celestials. You know, the beings that we saw creating suns and galaxies in the Eternals. This would mean that Franklin is born imbued with this celestial energy, which basically is confirmed when he brings Sue back to life. Her eyes suddenly glow with stars, just like Star-Lord's eyes when he connected to his father, the Celestial Ego. Now, we talked about this in our Ending Explained video, but if Dr. Doom is wanting to recreate the multiverse in Avengers Doomsday, then he can manipulate this 4-year-old with the power to warp reality and create stars. But for now, Franklin's just a little baby boy. And one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Sue uses her powers to show Reed his son. But in many ways, this also sets his resolve. He has to save the world and he has to save his boy. This little child is what's at stake. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, out on the street, Ben is outside the local synagogue getting cheered on by the students. Now this is a nod to Ben's Jewish faith, which wasn't technically established in the comics until Fantastic Four Volume 3 number 56 in 2002. But his religion was always hinted at in the comics. Like for one, Ben is a stand-in for Jack Kirby, who is Jewish, and Yancey Street is a fictional version of Delancey Street, which had a high Jewish population, and it's near where Jack Kirby grew up. Notice that Ben is wearing a Brooklyn Dodgers hat, even though the Dodgers left Brooklyn in 1957. Now in the comics, the thing has one signature phrase.
It's clobbering time.
And he has said this in every Fantastic Four movie. So I love that in this film, he says,
It's clobbering time!
That's just in the cartoon.
I mean, in a way, they're just teasing us, like how Cap didn't say Avengers Assemble until Endgame, and it took the Hulk 2 movies to say,
and Hulk. Smash.
Whereas Johnny is proud of his catchphrase.
Flame on! Sorry, what?
And he even teases Ben with his action figure that repeats his famous line over and over. But you know, Ben has his fans too. Later on, we see a little girl run into danger just to retrieve her Thing doll. Now, I mentioned that Johnny teases Ben, and in the comics, Johnny and Ben were always at each other's throats. But in this movie, we don't really see the same amount of teasing that we saw in the Tim Story films.
Johnny!
Natasha Lyonne is playing a teacher and love interest named Rachel Rosman. Now in the comics, Ben's one true love is a blind sculptor named Alicia Masters, and her stepfather is the supervillain Puppet Master, who gets name-checked a little bit later in the movie. But in this film, Rachel Rosman is created to be a tribute to Jack Kirby's real-life wife, Rosalind Goldstein. And I guess I have to also note that Natasha Lyonne has already played a role in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. She voiced Birdie, the daughter of Darcy and Howard the Duck from the show What If.
My ship! Hey, so, how does that happen?
Let's just move on before we think about that anymore, okay? So Reed quickly wipes out all of the crime in the city, name-dropping classic Fantastic Four villains like Puppet Master, Diablo, and the Wizard. And this is also showing us how this version of the Fantastic Four has already outgrown these earthly problems. They're going straight to world-ending threats, which means that in future movies, we could see them tackle villains like Annihilus, Blastar, or, God willing, Dr. Doom. And Reed stopping crime in the city also sets us up for the arrival of the ultimate cosmic threat, Galactus. Behind them, the sky lights on fire, just like in Fantastic Four issue 48, when the Watcher tried to disguise the Earth from Galactus's view. And notice that when Johnny flames on, little bits of dirt and ash actually hit the camera lens. That is just some great attention to detail that really submerges you into this world. And then they take the Fantasticar to Times Square. Now, we did see a version of this flying car in Rise of the Silver Surfer, and it briefly appeared at the end of Fantastic, but it first appeared back in Fantastic Four issue 3. It was a simple flying platform that later evolved into a 4-platform vehicle that could break apart. But in this movie, it's reimagined as a sweet-ass hot rod that looks like it was designed by Homer Simpson.
Presenting the car designed for the average man, the Homer.
And even the interior is just so choice. Even this incredibly unpragmatic steering wheel that is impossible to grip at 2 and 10. And here we see an advertisement for a robot called Automated Auto, a household chores robot kind of like Rosie in the Jetsons. And then we see the arrival of the Silver Surfer, played by Julia Gardner from Ozark.
I don't know shit about.
Now, I got a lot to explain about this character because Silver Surfer is one of my all-time favorite characters from the comics. First of all, her arrival interrupts the FF having a celebratory moment, just like how Doug Jones' Silver Surfer interrupted Reed and Sue's wedding in the Tim Story film. Now, in the comics, Jack Kirby created the Silver Surfer with the idea that he would be a being of pure energy that Galactus created. But then, when he met Alicia Masters, she teaches him about human compassion, which inspires him to turn on his creator. But then, when Jack Kirby was occupied with drawing other books, Stan Lee raised a leg on the character and rewrote his origin in Silver Surfer issue 1, drawn by John Buscema. Now, in the new version, the Surfer was a scientist named Norrin Radd, who offered up his service to Galactus to save his world, Zenn-La. Norrin's wife was named Shala Bal, and in an alternate reality, she became the Silver Surfer, which is what happens in this movie. Now, my favorite bit of Surfer trivia is this dialogue from the movie Crimson Tide.
Everybody that reads comic books knows that Kirby's Silver Surfer is the only true Silver Surfer. Now, am I right or wrong?
wrong.
And by the way, that dialogue was written by one Quentin Tarantino. And I want to say that if you are interested in this character, you can check out the excellent 1990s animated Silver Surfer series on Disney Plus that was so expensive they canceled it after one season. Or you could read the excellent Dan Slott and Mike Allred run from the comics. So just like in Fantastic Four issue 48, the Surfer arrives before Galactus and then summons him to the planet. And just like in the comics, the FF fight the Surfer but are no match for their cosmic power. This movie also shows Johnny going into space after the Surfer, just like in the 2007 Tim Story film. And when she appears in Times Square, we see news broadcasts by both ABC with a retro logo and WHIH. In the 616 universe, WHIH is the news network that we have seen in movies, shows, and those really fun digital shorts that Marvel made during phases 2 and 3. In Times Square, we see people dressed up for Halloween. There's these kids in the Thing costumes, and I also randomly love this woman who made a witch hat for herself out of a Wheaties box. So Johnny is immediately taken with the Silver Surfer, probably in part because she reflects his own face back at him. Now in the comics, Johnny is kind of a womanizer who is constantly getting his heart broken. One of his girlfriends even left him to become a Herald of Galactus, and another one left him to marry Quicksilver. And hell, he married a woman who turned out to be a Skrull spy. I think in this movie though, the reason they gender swapped the Silver Surfer was specifically so Johnny would have a crush on her, or at least enough of a crush to make him curious about her. Afterwards, Reed finishes up their rocket, the Excelsior, which is named after Stan Lee's signature catchphrase.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Sorry, I meant this catchphrase.
Excelsior.
When Ben is moping around Yancey Street, he looks at a video of himself as a human, and when the TV blinks off, he sees his reflection. Now this is kind of the movie's only nod to Ben feeling like a hideous monster, but in the comics, he has spent years moping and feeling sorry for himself about this. Before the launch, Reed and Ben get a bonding moment, which is good to see because the two of them are best friends. They were roommates in college, which is also where they first met Dr. Doom as a fellow undergrad. During their talk, Reed blames himself for their celestial rays accident. Now this is just like in the comics where Reed feels tremendous guilt over Ben's transformation and works tirelessly to return him to human form. And by the way, I cannot believe it has taken this long to have a movie where the Fantastic Four actually go into space. Like, they are explorers who discover hidden dimensions, planets, alternate realities, and it's so fun to just see them strap in and go to the cosmos. Now this scene is similar to the Avengers tracking Thanos in Avengers Endgame, with Reed using the Surfer's energy signature to follow her across the cosmos. When they launch, the camera is mounted to the rocket as the boosters are released, imitating this famous shot of the rockets jettisoning from the Apollo spacecraft. Now to travel, they use a faster-than-light rig, similar to the hyperspace ring that the Jedi starfighters used in Star Wars Attack of the Clones. Also, when they travel through space, they kind of warp space-time like a rounded liquid bubble. Now this is more in line with the wormholes that we see in films like Interstellar or 2001: A Space Odyssey, which by the way is the greatest science fiction film of the 1960s.
But how come they don't jump through honeycombs like in the other Marvel movies?
It's a great question, because when we see ships like the Milano jump through space, they are using an artificial jump network that was created specifically in the 616 universe. Remember, in the Marvels, it was revealed that the network was actually created with the quantum bands.
The quantum bands were used to create every jump point in the universe.
I also like the detail that Ben's helmet only covers his face and not his neck, because he needs to breathe, but his hide would be impervious to the rigors of outer space. And I also love that they don't have artificial gravity. Like, in reality, the only way to create artificial gravity would be to either have a lot of G-force pushing you forward or a spinning rig like we see on the ship in 2001. Now, super advanced fantasy ships like the Milano or Kree warships have advanced technology that creates gravity for them, but Reed's more rudimentary ship is working on 1960s technology, and the lack of artificial gravity also makes Franklin's birth way more dramatic later on. When they arrive, Galactus's craft looks like a sphere, just like in Fantastic Four issue 48. And I want to shout out this splash page for a second. Jack Kirby was one of the first comic book artists to incorporate photos into his artwork, and here he does this to create an otherworldly feeling that makes Galactus's technology feel far more advanced and terrifying than anything on the Fantastic Four's Earth. After scanning the ship, the Silver Surfer phases through their craft, just like he phased through the Chrysler Building in Rise of the Silver Surfer, and then she invites them to speak with her master. Notice that when they land, the rocket has RT on the side, short for Reed Tech, Reed's company, which we saw an advertisement for earlier in the movie. As they approach Galactus's ship, they leave a 4 footprint in the dirt, meant to evoke Neil Armstrong's moon landing footprint. And then we see Ralph Ineson's Galactus Galactus in his full planet-eating glory. Like, one of the worst things about the 2007 movie was that they cheaped out and turned Galactus into a cloud. Maybe because they were afraid that a comic-accurate dude with horns in his head might look silly. Honestly though, Kirby did draw Galactus kind of silly in his first appearance, even giving him a massive letter G on his chest. Galactus explains that he is super duper old and predates this whole universe. Now in the comics, he was originally a scientist named Galen of Ta, who tried to prevent the end of his universe. Instead, he merged with Eternity, you know, Mr. Cosmic Toes from Thor 4, and then was sentenced to spend the life cycle of this new universe eating planets to maintain a cosmic balance. In other words, the Celestials create and Galactus kills. And this is why he wants Franklin. In fact, in the Earth X universe, it's revealed that the reason Galactus wants to eat the Earth is because it houses a celestial baby like we saw in the Eternals. So this is why he wants to kill Franklin. He can sense that the child and his celestial energy can take his place. And I should also note that these two have a deep connection in the comics. In the Earth X universe, Franklin actually becomes Galactus. And in the Jonathan Hickman run of the Fantastic Four, the two of them become kind of immortal friends, and they even witness the end of the universe together.
Oh, that's so nice.
He explains that Franklin has the power cosmic, a term lifted from the comics that basically means a being who has the power of the universe itself, usually drawn as like a bunch of black dots all clustered together. Characters like Silver Surfer, Adam Warlock, and Captain Marvel all have the power cosmic. But Johnny, always a hothead, decides to fight Galactus instead and bend backs his play. But they are so thoroughly overwhelmed that they are lucky to escape. In fact, they're so desperate that they actually fly toward a black hole to use its gravity to slingshot home.
Like James T. Kirk in Star Trek 4.
Exactly, but without the time travel.
Double dumbass on you!
But there was the possibility that they could have accidentally slipped into another universe. Remember, in the opening of Loki Season 1, Episode 6, we see that black holes are gateways into different dimensions, or other universes. But instead, they break clean away and the Silver Surfer is stuck in a time dilation for a few months.
Now, to say what now?
Basically, the slower you orbit near a large body of gravity, the faster time goes, like in Interstellar. And notice when she gets close to a black hole, she stretches out like spaghetti, going back to what Ouroboros warned Loki about in the show Loki.
Have you heard about how if you fall into a black hole, you turn into spaghetti?
No.
And I loved that Franklin Richards was born in space with the team about to die. It is like the most Fantastic Four way this could possibly go. And Sue has to do all of this without drugs, but also has to concentrate to use her powers while giving birth. It is a magical moment. I mean, the Infinity Saga was all about stories with daddy issues, but in this movie, the father of Marvel Comics becomes a dad. It's like showing how this universe is moving on and evolving. Now, when they return to the Future Foundation, we can see the statue of the original rocket that took them into space. And I just realized I didn't talk about the FF's uniforms yet. So their suits are blue and white, even though they were blue and black in the comics for decades, until John Byrne redesigned them at the start of his historic run in 1983. And notice how the vertical lines on the uniforms are visible when Johnny flames on, giving him the vertical line look that he has in the comics. And in the movie, the uniforms are designed to reflect the color scheme of their suits from their very first spaceflight. Now, when they return, they're greeted by Lynn Nichols, the chief of staff for the Future Foundation, who is played by Sarah Niles, who you might know from Ted Lasso. And I was honestly shocked that Reed just flat out told everybody the truth.
He asked too high a price.
What did he ask?
He asked for our child.
He doesn't just let them know that Galactus kicked their asses, but he tells them that Galactus wants their kid. This shows how deeply ethical Reed is and how trusting. Although, this is exactly what got the first Reed Richards killed, oversharing.
Black Bolt could destroy you with one whisper from his mouth.
What mouth?
What you say?
This causes the world to predictably fall into chaos. And here, I want to shout out another one of my favorite comics, The Marvels by Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross. This book presents the world of Marvel Comics through the lens of everyday people, and we see how ordinary citizens reacted to the coming of Galactus. And the cover of issue 3 is the Human Torch reflected in the Silver Surfer's skin, just like we see when they meet in this movie. The comic also does a fantastic job of showing how everybody on Earth just thought they were screwed. And the movie recreates this feeling, because there are no other superheroes and the Fantastic Four genuinely feel like they are going to lose this fight. And I don't know about you, but I half expected Galactus to devour their world and for only the Fantastic Four to escape and travel to Earth 616 like we saw in the Thunderbolts post-credit scene. So public opinion turns against the team, riots break out around the world, and a pro-Galactus cult forms on Mount Everest. And even the Yancey Street gang turns on Ben. Oh, and notice that when he walks through his old neighborhood, he wears a fedora and trench coat, just like the disguise he wears in the comics. So the team gets to work. I wonder if in Avengers Doomsday, Reed could adjust his teleporter to create a multiversal bridge. Now, Reed built a bridge just like this during the Jonathan Hickman run in the comics, and that comic was a crucial part to the lead up of the 2015 Secret Wars, which is probably going to be the basis for Avengers Secret Wars. So I think it would make sense if he invents this bridge at the start of Avengers Doomsday so they can arrive in that Thunderbolts post-credits scene. But Johnny, who remember, is a scientist, is obsessed with the Silver Surfer. She told him the Zenla expression, "die with yours," and he uses this to translate her entire language. Now Johnny, being the key to stopping Galactus, is sort of taken from the comics. In Fantastic Four 49, the Watcher helps Johnny onto Galactus' ship where he finds a device called the Ultimate Nullifier, which scares the pants off Galactus and makes him leave Earth. And in the comics, the Surfer's turn to good is what turned the tide against Galactus, just like in this movie, when she eventually helps knock him into the portal. Notice that when Reed and Sue are standing over Franklin's crib, that his mobile is made up of the solar system. I mean, that's appropriate for a god baby who has the power to rewrite reality and create stars. He should be at the center of the universe. Now, Reed does a hard calculation and says that he understands why people want him to give up this child. And this is what Reed does. He understands cold logic. But Sue is the actual heart of the team, so she's the one who connects with the emotions of the world while Reed connects with the logic. The scene where she shows the world her baby is basically like a mission statement for the optimism of the Fantastic Four. She stands in front of a statue of the team and tells everyone that the entire planet is part of their same family. They are all members of the Fantastic Four. And afterwards, everybody pitches in, which is very much in the spirit of World War II scrap drives.
Even little Timmy is doing his part, collecting scrap metal.
And the Kennedy-esque mission of Camelot.
Ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
Her message to the world is... Then we get a worldwide montage that is shown through split screens, which actually I think were edited and employed way better than the split screens that we saw in Ang Lee's Hulk. Now, during the bridge building scene, we see that one of the teleporters is being built in Lagos. That's the country where Wanda accidentally killed a bunch of people, and it was the name of a paper towel brand in WandaVision.
Lagos. For when you make a mess, you didn't mean to.
And we also see a Future Foundation flag on the moon, meaning that the Fantastic Four reached there before any other nation. And this is appropriate because the Future Foundation is kind of like a United Nations that actually works. So this shows how the Fantastic Four are leading their world to a kind of utopia where all nations work together for the betterment of all mankind. But the Cold War hasn't quite ended because during the montage we see that there is still an East and West Germany. But in the opening montage, the report says that members of the Future Foundation all agreed to disarm completely. And I think this is why they made a point to show that Latveria did not attend, because Dr. Doom would never submit to being disarmed. When Reed and Sue look at Franklin and the baby monitor, notice that he has a toy giraffe. This is probably a nod to the giraffe that Wanda and Vision buy for their twins in episode 3 of Matt Shakman's WandaVision. And then the movie adds something fun to the Fantastic Four canon. Ben has to grind down his rocks like he's shaving his head and beard. Now, all of this fun optimism is squashed when the Surfer interrupts and easily wrecks every teleporter except one. To get to her, Johnny plays the recordings from Zenla and then makes her confront her past crimes when she destroyed countless other worlds for her master. Then we see flashbacks of Shah LaBelle and her family on Zenla, and we learn that she is a mother. And this could explain why earlier she asked Galactus to spare the life of the baby. In order to save Franklin, they set up a bait and switch where they lure Galactus to Times Square, which will probably work because he's a f***ing tourist. But just like the Avengers, the Fantastic Four are worried about collateral damage, so they evacuate the city into Subterranea.
Yeah, I missed all that setup.
Well, like I said earlier, the Fantastic Four fight the Mole Man in their very first issue. In the comics, the Mole Man is basically a loner who hates society, so then he discovers a race of moloids and monsters underground and becomes their king. Now, there have been times when he's become an ally to the Fantastic Four like he is in this movie. And in the prequel comic, we see that Sue gets the UN to acknowledge Subterranea as a separate nation, and that's why people are evacuated to these caves under New York. In Times Square, we see an ad for Aquaria soda, which was also advertised in the prequel comic book. Now, while the world is rallying together, we hear this quote by Margaret Mead. "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has."
Which is really sweet because Margaret Mead was a huge fan of the Fantastic Four.
That's not true, but thanks for trying. And then we get to the big showdown, so let's break down this final fight. Galactus arrives on his throne, kind of reminded me of Thanos, and this is how we get this incredible shot of his silhouette completely overshadowing the city. Now, when he comes ashore, he looks down at the Statue of of Liberty with a little grin, like he's amused at these people who think that they could create a great monument when really she's so small.
That's like me. I am so small.
Yes, you are. He uses his X-ray vision to spot Franklin, and then Johnny blinds him with flames so they can pull an old switcheroo. Basically, the third act is like the disappearing pig trick from Willow. It's all very silly, but it's the kind of plot mechanic that you would find in a Stan Lee book. So I'm glad that their plan failed. In fact, all of their plans fail all throughout the movie, and Galactus sees right through the deception and beats them down. And then he calls them clever little bugs. So, a few big takeaways from this fight. One, I think this is the first movie to make Reed's powers actually look cool. It's easy for him to come across as silly, but the movie makes it clear that his superpower isn't stretching, it's his mind. So, to make Galactus lose his balance, Ben has to knock down these support columns and finally utters his catchphrase.
To me, my X-Men.
No, clobbering time, like on our shirt. So Galactus hits Ben so hard, he flies off into space, and then he starts to ice over, like the icing problem in Iron Man 1. But notice that when Johnny rescues him, the warmth of his hand already starts to melt the ice that's covering Ben. Ben also throws an oil truck at Galactus so Johnny can light him up. They just do anything to keep him off balance. Herbie is singing Franklin a lullaby, which is the theme from the 1960s Fantastic Four cartoon, and Galactus calls him My Salvation. So this is an important part of his character. Galactus does not want to eat planets. He wants to be free. And this shot of Galactus looming in the window was actually first shown at Comic-Con when they announced the movie. But when he gets Franklin, this sends Sue into full mama bear mode. Now, in the first few issues of the Fantastic Four, she was easily the weakest member of the team. Her only power was to turn herself or others invisible, and she was kidnapped in every other issue, and basically every villain wanted to marry her. But that all changed in the Fantastic Four issue 22, when she created invisible force fields for the first time. Then she gradually became the strongest member of the team by far, because she could create a force field inside your brain and then pop you like a melon. And here we see her face off against a freaking space god with the help of her team and another mother, the Silver Surfer. Then, after she dies, Reed says, "Stay with me," which, okay, are we still doing that?
Stay with me, Mom.
Stay with me.
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 But then a creepy CGI version of Franklin lays on his mama's chest. And this is the second creepy CGI baby in a superhero movie this month. At this point, I think I would prefer the baby doll from American Sniper. Now, there's also a parallel here with Iron Man after the Chitauri battle when he's seen dead until the Hulk woke him up. But in this case, Franklin awakens his mother with the power cosmic. Her eyes even light up with stars, like I mentioned earlier. I should also mention that this is just like in Rise of the Silver Surfer when the Surfer brings Sue back to life. And this takes us back to the Ted Gilbert Show, where the team is on a set that mimics the original set on the Ed Sullivan Show that debuted a different Fab Four, the Beatles. Gilbert wants Franklin to wear a little 5 onesie, and they refuse. And technically, when Franklin was little, he wore a shirt that said 4.5 in the comics. But then they're called away on an emergency mission. So I love the split screen of their wrist communicators. Obviously, this calls to mind shows like the Power Rangers or Thunderbirds, but the wrist communicators were also seen as very futuristic technology in the 1960s. You know, we saw them in Dick Tracy and James Bond. But then, even with all their future tech, they struggle to get the car seat into the Fantasticar, which honestly, relatable content. Now, the credits also have some fun Easter eggs, like this commemorative plaque to celebrate the spot where the Fantastic Four defeated Galactus. The end credits are designed in a style reminiscent of the great Saul Bass, who did credits for movies like Psycho and North by Northwest. And then we get the mid-credits scene, which we thoroughly broke down in our Ending Explained video. Now, we don't know if this is Robert Downey Jr. Dr. Doom, or maybe a Doom variant from this universe, but we can see that Doom has removed his mask and Franklin is touching his face. Maybe he's letting Franklin heal his face, or this is simply a show of trust. Either way, if Doom's plan is to restart the multiverse, then he can use a god baby like Franklin to create a new universe that he can rule. Now, this scene was directed by the Russo brothers, meaning that it could be a scene lifted straight from Avengers Doomsday. And I don't know if you caught this, but the end credits have a score credit for Alan Silvestri called Doom? And there is a final button showing the FF cartoon in this universe where they fight another classic villain, the android Dragon Man. But I was mostly touched that the credits included a tribute to Jack the King Kirby. His quote reading, "If you look at my characters, you will find me." Kirby died in 1994, so he didn't live to see so many of his creations on the big screen. Like, we have spent the past 30 years or so celebrating Stan Lee, but I don't think Kirby gets enough credit for originating so many of these ideas. He was a visionary man with talent and imagination who not only only co-created the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, but he also created Darkseid and the New Gods for DC. So I love that they paid tribute to him by naming this universe after his birthday. Well guys, that's all the Easter eggs that we found, but did you find any? Let me know in the comments below, or at me on Twitter, Blue Sky Threads, or on our free to join Discord server. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.